Right, so welcome to Britain, folks, where splashing a military plane with red paint is now a terror offence worthy of proscription, but arming a foreign power accused of genocide is just foreign policy as usual. Where Keir Starmer, once the human rights lawyer defending RAF base intruders in the name of peace back in 2003, he now runs a government seemingly dictated to by the Israeli embassy. If you thought Orwell was writing fiction, think again. But perhaps even he might have thought this was all too far-fetched to ever be possible, and yet here we are. This isn't satire at all, it's Westminster in 2025. In the Starmer era, the UK's anti-terrorism powers are no longer reserved for those who plant bombs or take lives, but for those who interrupt genocide logistics with a tinful of paint and a couple of crowbars. Palestine Action, the direct action group protesting Britain's complicity in Israel's ongoing destruction of Gaza. Not content with prosecuting their actions under criminal law, the government now wants to ban them entirely, brand them as terrorists, not just punish the crime, though criminal actions as part of protest are a lengthy part of British history. Just being a member, however, would be banned, acting to silence even the idea that resistance to genocide might be justified. Yet if this had happened 20 years ago, Starmer might have been in court defending them. Right, so as we know, the UK government under Keir Starmer appears to be preparing to designate the direct action protest group Palestine Action as a terrorist organisation. The implications of such a move reach far beyond a debate about protest tactics or foreign policy. They cut to the heart of what kind of a country Britain wants to be. What kind of a country do we want to live in? And more alarmingly, who is truly influencing its decision-making at the highest levels? Who is shaping the type of country Britain is? Because it doesn't appear to be us. Palestine Action, the grassroots pro-Palestine protest group, has gained notoriety for direct actions targeting UK complicity in Israel's ongoing bombardment of Gaza. One of their recent actions involved breaking into RAF Brize Norton and spraying red paint on military aircraft, symbolising blood and UK complicity in what they, and many others globally, describe as genocide in Gaza. For this, they now face the chilling threat of being classified as terrorists, being right up there with the likes of ISIS and Al-Qaeda. Starmer's plans to proscribe Palestine Action seem increasingly murky as further details emerge, though, raising some deeply troubling questions about foreign influence, state overreach, and, of course, sheer political hypocrisy. And does it not come down to that when it comes to Keir Starmer? Reports suggest that information about the case, including potentially sensitive data, has been shared with the Israeli government. A Freedom of Information request uncovered an email from the Attorney General's office to the Israeli embassy, containing contact details for both the Crown Prosecution Service, the CPS, and the Counter-Terrorism Command, SO-15, the unit investigating 28 Palestine Action activists, including the Filton 18 and the Instro 10. What reason exactly does the Israeli government have to be so deeply involved in UK domestic counter-terrorism investigations, then? Explain, please. And why is the UK government seemingly so eager to comply at that, sharing all this data, allegedly? To add to the troubling international entanglement, though, the Board of Deputies of British Jews, them again, a group widely regarded as a de facto proxy for the Israeli state operating in Britain under the guise of representing British Jews, has allegedly lobbied the government for Palestine Action's proscription and celebrated reports suggesting this may now come to pass. A statement from Phil Rosenberg, the BOD's president, said, "We welcome the reported decision to prescribe Palestine Action. Their actions over recent months has become increasingly egregious, targeting Jewish charities and communal sites, desecrating statues and encouraging acts of violence and vandalism. The forced break-in and sabotage on an RAF base was rightly the final straw. This group has been allowed to operate with impunity for far, far too long. Proscription is a necessary and proportionate step to protect public safety and uphold the rule of law." While the board presents itself as this representative body of British Jews, a great many British Jews utterly refute that, incidentally, many Jewish critics argue it represents the interests of Israel's government instead. One notable example of this came from former South African MP and arms trade expert, and himself Jewish, Andrew Feinstein, who stood against Starmer in last year's general election, who has said, in response to the BOD, that if only you were at all concerned about an actual genocide rather than being outraged by those who are opposed to genocide. As the son of a Holocaust survivor, I know that never again meant for all humanity. You don't represent most British Jews. You sure as hell don't represent me. The view of many British and non-British Jews alike, I am quite certain of, will feel represented by Feinstein's comment there far more than the BOD. This intervention obviously risks blurring the line between domestic policy and foreign lobbying to a dangerous degree, as we're now apparently seeing. The Starmer administration has also levelled accusations that Palestine Action is being influenced by foreign actors itself as part of its decision to seek proscription over mere prosecution. The irony here is obvious and pretty grotesque, isn't it? For while Starmer's government frets about supposed overseas influences on a protest group, it is evidently quite content to bow to the preferences of Israel, via the BOD or not, and its allies. The question on everyone's lips, which becomes frankly inescapable all things considered, is Keir Starmer governing for Britain or at the behest of a foreign power? At the same time all this is going on, the Metropolitan Police, already notorious as they are for political bias and inconsistent protest policing, let's put it, has, it seems, and to little surprise in my view, aligned itself with this authoritarian lurch. Met Police Chief Mark Rowley has released a statement expressing open frustration at a planned protest happening today, not yet having happened at time of writing, so I can't actually comment on anything that happens at that protest here, in support of Palestine Action as that has been organised to do, despite the group not even being proscribed yet. So we are perfectly entitled to do that. Rowley's statement somehow manages to both condemn the protest whilst claiming to support the right to protest. He really is a star. The relevant bit of his far too long piece of drivel, reading, "I'm sure many people will be as shocked and frustrated as I am to see a protest taking place tomorrow in support of Palestine Action. This is an organised extremist criminal group whose proscription as terrorists is being actively considered. Members are alleged to have caused millions of pounds of criminal damage, assaulted a police officer with a sledgehammer, and last week claimed responsibility for breaking into an airbase and damaging aircraft. Multiple members of the group are awaiting trial accused of serious offences. The right to protest is essential and we will always defend it, but actions in support of such a group go beyond what most would see as legitimate protest. Thousands of people attend protests of a different character every week without clashing with the law or with police. The criminal charges faced by Palestine Action members, in contrast, represent a form of extremism that I believe the overwhelming majority of the public rejects. That Rowley, Britain's top police officer, would condemn the right of British citizens to protest government action before any legal designation has occurred speaks volumes. It's an insult to the concept of due process, civil liberties, and basic democratic norms. Just shut up, man. Rowley's overt hostility suggests the police are not neutral enforcers of the law, but rather active agents in a political campaign against dissent. This is further evidenced by growing cooperation between UK counter-terrorism forces and the Israeli state, signalling what could reasonably be called collusion. Democratic protest is criminalised before the crime is even officially designated. And certainly, they can be prosecuted for the damage they've caused, no one's arguing that, but we're talking about proscription here. Where does that leave civil rights in Britain? Even the mainstream media, long deferential to authority on matters of national security, God knows they parrot the propaganda often enough, don't they? But on this, even some of them are beginning to express some unease. Now, The Guardian has just published an opinion piece. Too much for the paper to take a direct stand. We'll just get one of their scribblers to say something along those lines. And in this case, it's Sally Rooney, who has warned that branding Palestine Action as a terrorist organisation sets a perilous precedent. Once terrorism legislation is used to outlaw protest, which is what we're looking at here, it's only a matter of time before it is turned against any form of meaningful resistance. Rooney stated that she can only say that she admires and supports Palestine Action wholeheartedly and will continue to, whether that becomes a terrorist offence or not. It should be noted, though, that Rooney is quite safe to do that. She lives in Ireland. She won't be subject to whatever proscription Starmer metes out for the UK. Nonetheless, her criticism reflects a broader concern amongst the populace that Britain's democracy is hollowing itself out under Starmer's watch. One of the darkest ironies of this saga, though, the real glaring hypocrisy, which would be a great middle name for Starmer, hypocrisy, though Rodney does fit the plonker better, is Starmer's own history as a human rights lawyer. In 2003, he successfully defended a member of the so-called Fairford Five, anti-war protesters who broke into RAF Fairford to sabotage US B-52 bombers heading for Iraq. A rather familiar-sounding story, this, isn't it? They actually did more damage than Palestine Action did. They smashed instrument panels, fuel tankers, support vehicle windscreens, which were needed to supply the B-52 bombers due to fly that day, and cut brake cables on 15 bomb trailers. They also reportedly took grinding paste with them with the intent to put it in the fuel tanks. Their action, like Palestine Action's, was direct action protest. Back then, Starmer celebrated such actions as legitimate protest. Now, as Prime Minister, He seeks to brand similar protesters as terrorists. So what's changed? Wasn't the tactics, wasn't the moral cause. What changed was Starmer's political ambition and his sudden embrace of a disturbingly authoritarian form of governance and a far too strong allegiance to a genocidal apartheid state. And the hypocrisy deepens even further. The Labour leader who once promised in his fourth leadership pledge to promote peace and human rights is now overseeing what amounts to the criminalisation of moral conscience. Starmer's support for Israel, even as it lays siege to Gaza and provoked conflict with Iran, is both politically motivated and ethically indefensible. But for him, just another day at work. It's par for the course. Starmer's government has also come under pressure to proscribe Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC, a move urged by the same pro-Israel lobbying voices behind the Palestine Action crackdown. So this isn't the end of this. This is just setting the standard. These demands follow Iranian resistance and self-defense to Israeli aggression, of course. Israel has a right to defend itself, even as it was the instigator, is the narrative we keep getting fed, isn't it? All whilst Iran does not have that right at all, despite having been struck first, seemingly. International law says otherwise, but that's becoming a bigger and bigger joke as nobody stands up for it when it comes to Israel. Are all these terror designations being made based on evidence and UK security needs, or are they simply favour trading with the Israeli state and its advocates in Britain? The UK's ongoing material and political support for Israel's assault on Gaza, including arms exports, intelligence cooperation, diplomatic cover, makes this more than just a legal matter. It's a moral reckoning. Britain is now deeply complicit in that genocide, in my view, and those who dare to act against this complicity, like the activists of Palestine Action, being silenced not through debate or legal argument, but via the blunt weapon of terrorism legislation to simply silence them full stop. Protests happening today against the planned proscription of Palestine Action is thus not just a show of solidarity, it is a stand for the very principles of democracy and civil liberty. Its participants are risking intimidation and even arrest today to defend the idea that in a free society, political protest, especially protest against state violence, must never be equated with terrorism. To designate Palestine Action as a terrorist group is not to punish them for specific crimes. That can already be done through existing criminal law. But it is to make it illegal to even support their cause, to be a member, to express solidarity. It is to remove an entire political viewpoint from the realm of legal debate. Civil disobedience has long been the engine of progress. Part of protest, part of the history of protest in the UK, from the suffragettes to the anti-apartheid movement to the anti-Iraq war protests of the early 2000s. To suggest that direct action is incompatible with democratic protest is to literally rewrite history. Law-breaking, when non-violent and rooted in conscience, has always had a place in the fight for justice. That's what makes Starmer's two-faced stance here so galling, because he knows this. He once argued it in court and got one of those Fairford 5 participants cleared of charges. Starmer's eagerness to now suppress dissent under the guise of counter-terrorism should alarm not only activists, but anyone who cares about the future of democratic rights in this country. But this move appears to have been coordinated in part with a foreign government, one that is itself under investigation for war crimes, whose leader has an arrest warrant out against him, should horrify every citizen in this country. We must ask loudly and persistently who exactly is running this country these days. Is it our elected government, accountable to the British people supposedly, or is it foreign interests and unaccountable institutions acting behind closed doors here? Palestine Action may be the immediate target, but the implications are far broader. If a government can declare dissent to be terrorism on the basis of politics, not violence, then any of us could be next. Any organisation could be next. This moment demands clarity, courage and solidarity. A right to protest, a human right as that is at stake here. The people of Britain must not only protest against this authoritarian drift, they must demand a return to the democratic principles upon which their society supposedly rests. Because if Keir Starmer's Labour government can prescribe a protest group at the behest of foreign powers as things appear, as this looks like, then we no longer live in a democracy. We live in something far more dangerous. For more on Starmer's efforts to silence dissent in deference to Israel over Palestine Action, and more about what they actually did, which absolutely isn't terrorism at all, do check out this video recommendation here as your suggested next watch. Please do also hit like, share and subscribe if you haven't done so already, so as to ensure you don't miss out on all new daily content, as well as spreading the word and helping to support the channel at the same time, which is very much appreciated. Holding power to account for ordinary working class people. I'll hope to catch you on the next vid. Cheers, folks.